You can either do the work, or you can clear the desk you're so fond of. I don't much care which." The words landed in the glass office like ice water on a hot pan, and Nora Hale felt every head on the studio floor behind her turn very carefully back to its screen. The man who had said them did not raise his voice. That was the worst of it. He stood at the window, with the whole white glare of a July afternoon behind him, one cuff turned back a precise half-inch, and looked at her the way a person looks at a stain on a shirt they have not yet decided to throw away. She had known him for exactly 9 minutes. "I'm sorry," she said, though she was not. "Did you just—" "I said what I meant." He glanced at the roll of drawings under her arm as if it smelled. "Which is more than I can say for whoever approved these." What Nora did not know yet, could not have known, standing there with her jaw set and her pulse loud in her ears, and every intention of hating this man until the day the sea dried up, was that the coldest person she had ever met had a reason for every cutting word. And that reason was going to take the both of them apart, board by board, down to the studs. But that comes later. Start with the heat. The heat had been the first cruelty of the day, long before Elias Vance ever opened his mouth. It arrived at 6 in the morning like a hand pressed over the city's face, by the time Nora had walked the 11 blocks from the train to the studio. Because the fare she saved on the transfer went into a jar labeled "roof" in her grandmother's kitchen, the back of her blouse was stuck to her spine, and the tar between the pavement slabs had gone soft enough to catch a heel. She could smell it, that low summer smell of melting road and hot brick, and the sugar and yeast breath of the bakery on the corner, where the man in the doorway lifted 2 fingers to her the way he did every morning. "Miss Hale," he called, "you look like a woman going to war." "Just work," she said. "Same thing, some days. I'll have a cinnamon one waiting when you lose." "When I win, Sal," he laughed. And the laugh followed her down the block, and it was the last kind thing anyone would say to her for hours. Halloran and Reed occupied the top 2 floors of a narrow brick building that had been a hat factory 100 years before, and still, on humid days, gave off a faint felted smell in the stairwell. Wool and old glue and something like rain. Nora loved that smell more than she would ever admit out loud. She had loved it at 23. Carrying coffee and rolled trace paper for men who forgot her name. She loved it now at 29, when she was the one whose drawings held a project together while somebody else's name went on the cover sheet. The freight elevator was out again. The sign taped to it had gone yellow at the edges, so she climbed. On the 4th landing, the air conditioning gave up entirely, replaced by 3 box fans that only moved the warmth around and made the trace paper flutter like something trying to leave. There she is. Priya Nair swiveled her chair before Nora had even reached her desk. Priya had the corner near the good window and the temperament of a woman who had survived 4 rounds of layoffs by being both indispensable and completely unbothered. She was fanning herself with a set of elevation prints. "You didn't check your phone. My phone died on the train." Nora dropped her bag. "Why? What did I miss? You have your announcement face. I have my apocalypse face. There's a difference, and you'd know it if you—" "Priya, they sold us." Priya said it lightly, the way you'd mentioned the milk had turned. But her eyes weren't light. Overnight, well, over the weekend, but the email hit at 5 this morning. Halloran's out. Reed's staying on paper and nowhere else. The whole studio got folded into some outfit called Vance Atelier, and the new managing principal is already— She tipped her chin toward the glass office in the corner, the one that had stood empty since old man Halloran's knees finally sent him to a house by the water in there, since 7. Hasn't come out, hasn't said a word to anyone. Nora looked at the glass office. The blinds were half drawn. Behind them a shape moved, tall and unhurried, and something in her stomach tightened before she had a single reason for it. "Vance," she repeated. "Vance Atelier. I've heard that name." "You've more than heard it. They did the Meridian block. The transit hall with the light wells everybody wet themselves over." Priya lowered her voice. "He's supposed to be brilliant. He's also supposed to be a walking cold front. The last 3 people who worked directly under him left the profession. One of them raises goats now. Nora, actual goats. That could be aspirational. It is not aspirational." A laugh got halfway up Nora's throat and stalled there because a thought had arrived underneath it, cold and practical, the way every important thought arrived for her now. New ownership meant new headcount math. New headcount math meant a list, and somewhere on that list, in a column she couldn't see, was her name and a number. And either the number was worth keeping, or it wasn't. She thought of the jar in her grandmother's kitchen with roof written on the lid in blue marker. She thought of the letter from the county that had come 3 weeks ago, the one about the reassessment, the one she hadn't read aloud to Gran, because Gran would have started apologizing for being alive. And there was no version of that Nora could stand. "Hey," Priya's hand landed on her wrist. "You've got the look." "I don't have a look. You've got the roof look." "I need this job," Nora said quietly, and hated how bare it sounded in the hot air. "That's all. I need it more than I need to like whoever's behind that glass." "Then here's your chance to prove it," Priya murmured, "because he's coming out. And he is looking directly at you." She felt it before she saw it, that particular pressure of being chosen out of a room, which is not the same as being wanted, and, in her experience, was usually the opposite. When she turned, the door of the glass office stood open, and the man from behind the blinds was crossing the floor toward her. And the whole studio had gone quiet in the way a field goes quiet before weather. He was younger than she'd expected, and colder than she'd been warned. Dark hair cut close, a summer weight suit the gray of a coming storm, a face that seemed to have been assembled by someone who understood proportion perfectly, and warmth not at all. He walked without hurry, and people moved out of his path without seeming to decide to. He stopped at her desk. He looked, not at her, but at the drawings pinned above it, the pavilion study she'd been developing on her own time, the one nobody had asked for, a small civic structure folded around an old seawall. "Who did these?" he said, not a question. An accusation with a question's punctuation. "I did." Nora stood. It felt better to be at eye level with him, or nearer to it. "Nora Hale. I've been on the Kestrel Civic team I know what you've been on." His gaze moved across her pavilion study, slow, missing nothing. Something flickered behind his eyes, there and gone, too fast to name, but it was warm, she'd have sworn it was warm, and then it was frost again. The Kestrel drawings on the shared server, the section through the roof assembly. That's yours as well. It wasn't a compliment. She waited for it to become one. It didn't. Half of it, she said. The senior team, he repeated, and let the phrase sit there and rot. The senior team put a drainage detail on that roof that will pond water at the first hard rain and rot the whole assembly out inside 4 winters. You caught it. There's a note in your handwriting in the margin. A polite note. His eyes came to hers at last, flat and gray as slate. Nobody acted on it. Heat crawled up her neck that had nothing to do with the fans. It wasn't my call to, no, he said. It wasn't. That's the problem I've been hired to fix. He turned, finally, to face her fully, and up close he was worse, because up close she could see that the coldness wasn't lazy. It was deliberate. It cost him something to keep his face that still, and he paid it anyway, and that frightened her more than shouting would have. You've been carrying this studio's competence on your back and letting other people sign it. I don't run a studio like that. For one dangerous second, she thought it was going to be good news. So here's what happens, he went on. The Kestrel Pavilion, the real one, the commission, not that seawall daydream on your wall, is 9 weeks from a public review it is not remotely ready for. I'm taking it over personally. And you're going to redraw it under me, start to finish, from the ground up. He didn't wait for her to be pleased. He seemed, if anything, to already be tired of the whole exchange. You can either do the work, or you can clear the desk you're so fond of. I don't much care which. And there it was, the sentence she would replay for weeks, landing in the glass-walled quiet while 40 people pretended to read their screens. I'm sorry, she said. Did you just... I said what I meant. A glance at the roll of drawings under her arm. Which is more than I can say for whoever approved these. She should have swallowed it. Every practical cell in her body, the ones that counted train fare and read county letters and knew exactly what the jar in Gran's kitchen was still missing, screamed at her to swallow it. Instead, she heard her own voice go very level, the way it did right before it got her in trouble. You've been here 4 hours, she said. You've read 1 margin note and half a server. And you've decided you know what I carry. The floor stopped pretending to work. Elias Vance looked at her. Really looked, for the first time, and for the length of a held breath something moved under the frost. Something that was not annoyance, and was not indifference, and made no sense at all on the face of a stranger. His jaw shifted. The turned cuff got a quarter turn more, one thumb running along its edge like a man checking a knife. I know precisely what you carry, Miss Hale, he said, so quietly it was almost gentle, and that was the strangest thing of all. That's why your desk is the only one on this floor I haven't touched. Then he walked away, and the fans pushed the hot air around, and Nora stood there with her heart going like a fist on a door, absolutely certain of 2 things, that she despised him and that she had no idea what he had just meant. Okay, Priya breathed from behind her, not moving her lips. So we hate him. We hate him. Loudly? Or the quiet career-preserving kind of hate? I haven't decided. Decide fast. Priya's chair creaked. Because Duvall from HR just got the little envelope face, and he's walking the perimeter with a folder, and Nora, nobody who's staying, gets a folder. Nora did not turn around to look at the folder. She had learned, somewhere in the long apprenticeship of being overlooked, that you never let them see you count the lifeboats. She sat back down. She woke her dead phone against the charger under her desk and watched it struggle to life. She smoothed the pavilion study on the wall with 2 fingers, the little civic structure folded around the old seawall, the one nobody had asked her to draw, the one that looked, if she was honest, a great deal like the cove below her grandmother's cottage, though she had never told a soul that, and never would. By noon the studio had a new geography. 6 desks sat empty with their monitors dark and their chairs pushed in, and the people who'd occupied them had gone down the hat factory stairs carrying bankers' boxes, and no one had known what to say, so mostly no one had said anything. And the box fans had covered the silence like a bad bandage. Nora's desk was not one of the empty ones. She kept waiting to feel relieved about that, and kept not managing it, because relief required trusting that the ground would still be there tomorrow, and she had stopped trusting ground a long time ago. At 12:30, a message appeared on her screen from an internal address she didn't recognize. No greeting, no signature. Just Kestrel model files. My office. 1 o'clock. Bring the seawall drawing. She read it 3 times. The last 2 words made no sense. The seawall drawing wasn't a Kestrel file. It wasn't a firm project at all. It was a thing she did after hours, the way other people did crossword puzzles or drank too much coffee, a private argument she kept having with a stretch of coastline 4 hours north of the city. There was exactly one printed copy, and it was pinned to the wall above her own desk, and it had been on that wall for 11 days, since long before Elias Vance had ever set foot on this floor. So how, she thought, the fine hairs rising along her arms despite the heat, does a man who arrived this morning know it exists? She looked up at the glass office. The blinds were open now. He was standing at the window again, with his back to the floor, phone to his ear, one hand braced on the frame, and even from here, even through glass, she could see the tension in his shoulders. The particular stillness of a person holding something down with both hands. "Priya," she said slowly. "Did anyone photograph the boards this morning for the handover deck?" The inventory. "The intake team did the whole floor at 8. Why? They didn't shoot my wall." Priya leaned to check, frowning. "No, they skipped your bay." "Weird. It's the only one they—" She stopped. "Nora, what's wrong with your face?" "Nothing. Everything. I have a meeting." She unpinned the seawall drawing carefully, the way you'd lift something sleeping, and rolled it, and the trace paper made its small dry leaf sound, and under the fans and the far-off horns and the felted old smell of the stairwell, she was aware of her own heartbeat with an unwelcome clarity. She did not want to bring this drawing into that cold glass room. It was the one thing in the building that was entirely hers, unsigned by anyone, unclaimed, unpaid, the cove below Grand's cottage, rendered in graphite at 1 a.m. across 100 sleepless nights. Handing it to Elias Vance felt like handing him a key to a house she'd never told him she owned. She thought about not going. For exactly 4 seconds she thought about it. Then she thought about the jar with roof on the lid, and the county letter folded small in her bag, and the way Gran had said on the phone last Sunday, over the sound of gulls, "Oh, don't fuss about the house. Love, it's only a house," in the bright false voice she used for the biggest lies. And Nora stood and squared the roll under her arm and walked toward the office of the man she had decided, with her whole aching practical heart, to hate. At the door she paused, one hand on the cool metal handle, and caught her own reflection ghosted over his in the glass. Her, flushed and stubborn and damp at the temples, him, turned now to watch her come, unreadable. That flicker of not quite warmth surfacing and drowning again behind his eyes. "You're early," he said through the door, before she'd opened it. "You're strange," she said, and pushed it open, "and I want to know how you knew about this drawing." "Before we discuss a single line of anyone's pavilion, that's what I want to know." For a moment Elias Vance said nothing at all. He looked at the roll under her arm the way a person looks at a letter they've been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. Then he crossed to his desk and opened the flat drawer beneath it and set something down on the glass between them without a word. And every argument Nora had rehearsed on the walk across the floor went out of her head at once. Because lying on the desk, softened and furred at the creases from a great deal of folding and unfolding, was a drawing of the same cove. Her cove. The exact stretch of coast below her grandmother's cottage, rendered in a hand that was not hers, older, looser, a little unsure of its verticals, but unmistakably, impossibly, the same view. "Sit down, Miss Hale," Elias said, and for the first time all day there was nothing cold in his voice at all. "I think you'd better sit down." Nora did not sit down. She stood with the roll still under her arm, looking at the folded thing on the glass, and the box fans on the floor behind her turned the studio's warm air over and over. And somewhere below the window, a delivery truck backed up with a slow electronic wail. "That's my cove," she said. No, Elias hadn't moved from the desk. His fingertips rested at the edge of the old paper, not quite touching the graphite, the way you'd hold your hand near a candle to test it. It's the same cove. That's not the same thing, and you know it isn't, or you wouldn't have gone white just now. I didn't go white. You went the color of trace paper. A muscle moved at his jaw. "Sit down. I'm not going to enjoy this, and neither are you, and we'll both do it worse standing." She sat because her knees had quietly decided the matter without consulting her. The chair was the good kind, cool leather, and it exhaled under her, and she hated that it was comfortable. She set her own drawing across her lap like a shield and did not unroll it. "Whose hand is that?" she said, nodding at the folded sheet. "It isn't yours. The verticals lean. You don't lean." Something almost happened at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Nothing so generous, but a flinch in the direction of one. "No," he agreed, "I don't lean." He turned the old drawing a half-inch on the glass, so it faced her squarely, and she saw the soft brown blooms at the folds, the pale ghost lines where a hand had gone back over a wall 3-4 times, unsure it's my mother's. She drew that view the summer I was 12, from a bench above the north path. There was a bench, iron, with a scroll on the arm, painted green, the paint always flaking. "There's still a bench," Nora said, before she could stop herself. The scroll's rusted through on one side. Gran ties her scarf to it in a wind so she can find the gap in the wall. The room went very still. Down on the floor, a phone rang twice and stopped. Elias looked at her for a long moment, and the frost that had ruled his face all morning did something she had not seen it do. It thinned, just at the eyes, the way ice thins over moving water without breaking. "Gran," he repeated, carefully, as though the word might spill. "My grandmother. The white cottage at the top of the cove path, past the 2 leaning posts where a gate used to be." Nora's mouth was dry. The summer heat had followed them even up here, into the glass, and she could smell the hot dust in the blinds and the faint chemical sweetness of the plotter in the corner. And under it, absurdly, she could almost smell the cove itself. Salt and wet stone and the green rot of weed at low tide, dredged up whole out of memory by the leaning verticals on a stranger's page. "How," she managed, "do you know the posts?" "Because I spent 9 summers 4 cottages down from your grandmother's gate," Elias said. "And because your section through the Kestrel roof assembly has a note in the margin, you wrote it at 1 in the morning, I'd guess. From the way the letters fall over, that says, 'Water always wants to go home. Find where it's going and let it.' My mother used to say that, word for word, about the seawall, about everything." His hand finally left the paper. "I read that line on the shared server 3 weeks ago, and I could not work for the rest of the day. I need you to understand that I did not come here for a drainage detail, Miss Hale. I came here, and then I found you already inside the building, which is either the best luck I've had in some years or the worst, and I genuinely cannot yet tell which." It was the most words he had said all day, and they came out level and low and completely without warmth on the surface. And underneath the surface was something Nora did not have a name for and did not trust, because trusting it would cost more than she had. "You looked at my server files," she said slowly. "You looked at my private drawing. You skipped my wall in the inventory so no one else would photograph it. And then you called me in here and told me I could clear my desk." She set the roll down on the glass beside his mother's drawing, deliberately, so the 2 coves lay edge to edge. You've been in this building for 6 hours. Which one of those things am I supposed to feel first? Anger, he said. Obviously anger. You're doing it very well. Don't. I'm not being cold. That was me not being cold. You'll learn the difference, or you won't. He stood and went to the window and put his back to her the way he had all morning, and she understood now that the window was where he went when he could not let his face be seen. Here is what is true, and then you can decide what to hate. The Kestrel Pavilion is a real commission, a public one, and it is in trouble. That part I did not invent to get you into this room. The senior team is a season behind, and the review board will eat them alive in 9 weeks. And when they do, this studio closes, and 40 people carry banker's boxes down those stairs instead of 6. That is arithmetic, and I am good at arithmetic, and I did not sleep last night doing it. He paused. I asked for you specifically. I want that on the record between us before anyone downstairs tells you a prettier or an uglier version. I bought this studio, and I asked for you by name, and I will not pretend otherwise, even though pretending would make the next 9 weeks considerably easier for me. Nora looked at the 2 drawings on the glass, at the flaking green bench that still stood, at the gap in the wall where a scarf still snapped in the wind. You bought a whole studio, she said, to redraw one pavilion. I bought a whole studio for a great many reasons, Elias said, and I am only obliged to tell you the one that concerns your desk. And there it was, a door, closed very quietly in the middle of a sentence. She heard it close. She had spent her whole working life listening for exactly that sound, the click of a thing withheld, and she filed it where she filed everything. In the cold, clear place behind her ribs that had never once been wrong. Right, she said, and stood, and rolled her cove back up before he could look at it any longer. Then here's mine for the record. I'll redraw your pavilion. I'll do it better than anyone in this building could, because I already have been on my own time for years, and you clearly know that, or I wouldn't be standing here. The trace paper made its dry leaf sound. But I'm not yours because you asked for me by name. I've been asked for by name before. It's never once meant what the person saying it wanted me to think it meant. For a moment, he didn't answer. The July glare pressed white against the glass and lit the fine grain of his suit, storm gray going nearly silver at the shoulder. And when he turned his profile to her, she saw that the cold had come back down over his features like a shudder, deliberate, effortful, a thing he was choosing. 9 o'clock tomorrow, he said. Bring the section. Not that one. A small motion of 2 fingers at the roll under her arm. That one stays yours. I only needed to know it was real. She was at the door, hand on the cool handle, when he spoke again, so quietly the fans nearly took it. How is she? He said. Your grandmother. The cottage. Nora's hand tightened on the metal. Every practical cell in her body told her to say fine and leave. Instead, the truth came up her throat, because the man had a drawing of the flaking green bench in his desk, and there was no lying to a person who owned that. The county reassessed the land, she said to the door, not to him. The number tripled. She's lived in that cottage her whole married life, and now there's a letter that says the water she can see from her kitchen is worth more than the roof over her head. So, she opened the door on the hot roar of the floor. That's how she is, 9 o'clock. She did not see his face when she said it. If she had, she might have understood a great deal sooner, and been a great deal more afraid. The floor was worse by afternoon. The heat had thickened into the kind that sits on a room like a wet coat, and the 3 box fans had been joined by a 4th that someone had liberated from a supply closet. And still the trace paper curled, and the backs of necks shone, and the felted old smell of the building had gone sour with too many bodies and too much fear. 6 empty desks. Chairs pushed in. Devil from HR had finished his slow perimeter walk and gone back downstairs with his folder lighter than it started, and no one spoke of the names that had been in it. So, Priya said, without looking up from her elevations, when Nora dropped into her chair. You went into the ice house, and you came out with all your fingers. Report, he knows my grandmother's cove. Priya's pen stopped. He what? He summered there, as a boy. He has a drawing of it in his desk. Nora kept her voice under the fans. He bought the studio and asked for me by name, and he skipped my wall in the inventory on purpose, and he will not tell me why past the pavilion. Priya set the pen down with the care of a woman diffusing something. Okay, I want to be clear that half of that is the most romantic thing I have ever heard, and the other half is how people end up on the news. Which half do we live in? The half where I need the job, and he holds it. Naturally, the worst half. Priya leaned in. But Nora, a drawing? In his desk? A man like that doesn't keep a drawing unless... Don't. Nora pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. Please, I have exactly enough left in me for the work. If I start wondering what a drawing in a locked drawer means, I'll have nothing for the section, and the section is the only thing that keeps Gran's roof on. So, the section. The section, Priya agreed, loyal and quick, and it was one of the reasons Nora would have walked into weather for her. Speaking of things that keep roofs on, her chin dropped a degree. Incoming, 3 o'clock, and he does not look like a man who lost his desk this morning. He looks like a man who thinks he gained one. Nora turned. Coming down the aisle between the drafting bays, unhurried, a coffee in each hand, as though it were an ordinary Tuesday, was Trent Whitlock, senior associate, 12 years in. The name that had gone on the cover sheet above her roof section, and the drainage detail that would have ponded water for 4 winters if she hadn't caught it in a margin at 1 a.m. He was smiling. Trent smiled the way expensive cars idle, low and smooth, and meant to be heard. Hale, he set one of the coffees on her desk, uninvited, the cup sweating a ring onto her cutting mat. Iced, you looked parched. Big morning. Trent, heard you got the golden ticket. He perched on the edge of her desk, one loafer swinging, and the smell of him rolled over her, cedar cologne laid on thick against the heat, and under it the ghost of cigarettes he told everyone he'd quit. New principal pulls the whole team into review and comes out with exactly one name. Yours, the junior with the margin notes. The smile never moved. You must be thrilled. I'm employed, Nora said. It's a low bar today, and I'm grateful to clear it. Modest, good instinct. That, keep it. He picked her scale rule up off the mat and turned it in his fingers, a small trespass, the kind he specialized in. Only, friendly warning, one colleague to another. A man like Vance doesn't reach past 12 years of seniority for a junior because he loves her line work. He does it because a junior is cheap and grateful and doesn't have a contract with teeth. He'll ring you out on this pavilion for 9 weeks, put his own name where mine used to be, and when the review's done, he'll have his headline, and you'll have a very nice line on a Ursum you'll be using sooner than you think. He set the scale rule down, precisely crooked. I'd hate to see it. That's all. We've been friends. We've never been friends, Trent. No, he agreed pleasantly, standing. But we've never been enemies either, and you want to think hard about which of those is more useful to you in a building this small. He tapped the sweating cup. Drink your coffee. It's a kindness. There won't be many. He walked off unhurried, idling smooth, and Priya waited until he'd turned the corner before she exhaled. I retract every romantic thing I said. This is definitely how people end up on the news. He's frightened, Nora said, watching the empty aisle. That's what that was. His details in the review file. Vance read it out loud to me this morning, like a coroner. She pushed the iced coffee 2 inches away with one finger, unwilling to give it the dignity of her mouth. He put his name on my roof, and now the roof has a witness. He needs me to be the villain of my own story before I become the witness of his. So don't drink his coffee. I'm not drinking his coffee. Good, because it's got that look. The poisoned apple look. Priya squinted at it. Metaphorically, probably. That, at least, dragged a breath of a laugh out of Nora, thin and real, the first of the whole scorched day, and it was still on her face when her dead phone finally clawed its way back to life against the charger and lit up with the little cascade of everything she'd missed since the train, and at the bottom of the cascade, under the studio-wide layoff email and 3 from Priya and 1 from Sal at the bakery that just said cinnamon's getting cold, was a voicemail from a number with Gran's county code, and it was not from Gran. She stepped into the stairwell to hear it, into the felted wool and glue smell and the small mercy of the cross-draft that lived on the landing, and pressed the phone hard to her ear against the traffic 4 floors down. Miss Hale, this is Dennett from the county assessor's office, returning your grandmother's inquiry. A dry, careful voice. A voice that read numbers for a living. I'll be straight with you, since you asked me to be. The reassessment stands, but there's a wrinkle. Someone's filed a purchase interest on the whole North Shore parcel, cottages, the path, the seawall, the lot of it. Development inquiry. It went in Friday. Papers shifting. I mention it because a filing like that tends to freeze a homeowner's appeal options while it's active, and your grandmother's appeal window is 90 days. I'd get proper advice, if I were you, and quickly. 90 days goes fast. That's all I can say on a voicemail. I'm sorry it isn't better. The message ended. The draft moved the hot air across the landing. Somewhere far below, the delivery truck wailed its slow backward wail again, and Nora stood with the phone still at her ear long after the voice had gone, doing the cold, clear arithmetic behind her ribs. A development inquiry. On the North Shore. Filed Friday. Vance Atelier did the Meridian block. The transit hall. Light Wells everybody wet themselves over. He bought a whole studio for a great many reasons, and I am only obliged to tell you the one that concerns your desk. She did not want to make the shape her mind was making. She stood in the stairwell and refused it. The way you refuse a step onto ice, you can hear ticking. There were 100 developers. Friday was a coincidence. He had a drawing of the cove because his mother summered there, because the bench was green, because water wants to go home, a boy 4 cottages down, 9 summers. That was all. That was human. That was almost unbearably kind. But a door had clicked shut in the middle of his sentence this morning. She had heard it. She was never wrong about that sound. She went back onto the floor with her face arranged. Because you never let them see you count the lifeboats, and she found the glass office already dark, the blinds drawn, Elias gone for the day, and taped to her monitor, in a hand whose verticals did not lean, a single square of yellow paper. The section, tomorrow, and bring your grandmother's 90-day letter. There may be something I can do. E.V. She read it 4 times. The heat pressed in. 2 desks down, the 4th stolen box fan clattered against a loose grill, on, and Nora stood holding a note that offered to save the exact roof a Friday filing might be moving to take. From a man who owned the drawing of the bench and would not say why he'd bought the studio, and she could not for the life of her tell whether she was being rescued or surveyed. "Priya," she said. "What was the name of the outfit that did the Meridian block?" The full legal name. Not Vance Atelier, the holding company underneath it. Priya was already typing, because Priya could hear weather too. "Give me a second. It's a shell of a shell, these people always." Her typing slowed. Then stopped. When she looked up, the apocalypse was back in her eyes, quieter than the mornings, and much worse. Nora, the holding company. It's called North Shore Reach. Down on the street the truck finished backing up at last and went silent, and in the sudden lack of it, Nora could hear her own pulse. Loud as a fist on a door, and the yellow note trembled very slightly in the draft of the fan. "North Shore," she said. "I'm sure it's a—" Priya stopped, because neither of them was sure of anything, and lying was Trent's job, not theirs. It could be nothing. Half the property in this state has North or Shore in the name. It's the ocean, Nora. Everybody's on the— "Filed Friday," Nora said quietly. "The inquiry on Grand's parcel went in Friday. He walked into this building Monday and asked for me by name. The two of them sat in it, in the wet coat heat, under the 4 fans, surrounded by 6 empty chairs pushed neatly in." "Okay," Priya said at last, gently, "the way you'd talk to someone standing too near an edge. So there are 2 stories. In one, a boy who loved that cove grew up and found the woman who's still drawing it and wants to save her grandmother's roof, and it's the most decent thing a cold man ever did." She swallowed. In the other one, Nora said, "he found out the woman drawing the cove was cheap and grateful and worked for the very studio holding up his review, and he bought all of it. The cottage, the seawall, the girl with the margin notes, in one clean Friday to Monday move, and the drawing in the drawer isn't a memory, it's a map." She peeled the yellow note off her monitor. She held it a moment, the flaking green benchman's careful upright hand offering to do something about a letter he should have had no way of knowing existed until she'd told him herself 4 hours ago, to a closed door. Except she had told him after he'd left the note. No, she had told him in his office at 1 o'clock. He'd asked how the cottage was. She'd said the county tripled the number. And the note said, "Bring your grandmother's 90-day letter," and Dennett from the county had only said the words 90 days on a voicemail she'd heard alone in a stairwell at 3. She had never told Elias Vance the appeal window was 90 days. Nora sat down very slowly. The fan clattered against its grill, on and on and on. And outside the July light began at last to lengthen and go gold across the drafting bays, laying a long warm stripe over the empty desks, as though nothing at all had happened. And she looked at the note in her hand and understood that tomorrow at 9 she was going to walk back into that glass room, and she no longer had the smallest idea which of the 2 stories she was walking into, only that both of them ran straight through her grandmother's roof, and only one of them let her keep it. "Priya," she said, "what time does the county office close?" Priya checked, already reaching for her bag, already in it with her, because that was the other reason. 5. "You've got 40 minutes, and it's across town in this heat. Then I'm not going to make it." Nora stood, rolling the seawall, drawing tight, sliding the yellow note into her breast pocket where she could feel the edge of it against her heart like a splinter. "But I'm going to try, and if I don't, I'm going to be standing outside their door at 8 tomorrow morning instead of standing in his, and he can wait and wonder, for once, where I am." She was 3 steps toward the stairwell when the glass office phone began to ring behind the drawn blinds, the internal line. The one only the floor could reach, ringing into the empty dark room where no one sat. On and on under the clatter of the fan, as if the building itself had noticed she was leaving and did not intend to let her. The glass office phone rang and rang into the dark, and Nora very nearly turned back for it. That was the trained animal in her. The one that had spent 6 years answering every bell in every building, but she caught the handle of the stairwell door instead and held it, and let the ringing chase her down into the felted wool and glue cool of the stairs. "Leave it," Priya called after her, low. "Whatever it is, it can want. It's the floor line. Somebody wants him. Then somebody can find him. You've got 38 minutes and a city between you and it." The heat outside hit like a held breath let go. 4 o'clock, and the pavement gave back the whole day at once, tar soft and shimmering, the smell of it thick as syrup in her throat. Nora went down the block at a walk that wanted to be a run, the rolled cove drawing pressed to her ribs, the yellow note a small stiff splinter over her heart. Sal was pulling his awning in against the slant of the sun. "War's over already?" he called. "War moved," she said. "I'm chasing it across town. Take the cinnamon one." He was already holding out the wax paper twist, warm through the paper, the smell of it, butter, sugar, that dark ribbon of spice, nearly undoing her on the spot. "For the road." "You'll not win a thing on an empty stomach, Miss Hale. Nobody ever has." She took it because refusing Sal was a thing she did not have the strength for today, and she ate it on the crosstown bus with the windows jammed half down and the vinyl seat burning through her skirt, and it was the only kindness that reached her whole, and she was grateful past speech. The county building was a gray slab that held the heat like a stone left in a fire. She took the steps 2 at a time and hit the glass doors at 1 minute to 5. And a security guard with a ring of keys the size of a bracelet was already turning the bolt from the inside. "We're closed, miss. Please, assessor's office." "I called this morning. A Mr. Dennett. Closed." But he looked at her face, flushed and damp and stubborn, and something in it made him pause with the key half turned. "You can be here at 8. My grandmother has 90 days, and one of them's going tonight. Please," he sighed the sigh of a man who had heard every version of please a public building could produce. And then, behind him, an inner door opened, and a narrow man in shirt-sleeves came out with a satchel over his shoulder, mid-50s, the careful walk of someone whose whole life was rows and columns. And Nora knew the voice before he spoke, because she'd played it 4 times in a stairwell. "It's all right, Marcus," Dennett said. "I'll give her 5 minutes on the step. Then we both go home." He came out into the gold slant of the evening and let the door lock behind him, and he looked at her the way clerks look, taking the measure of how much truth a person could carry. "Miss Hale, you made good time for a bad hour. You said someone filed a purchase interest. On the whole parcel. I did. I need the name on it." He set the satchel down between his feet, unhurried, and the heat sat on both of them, and somewhere a sprinkler ticked to life on a strip of municipal grass, and threw the smell of wet dust into the air. "It's public record, so I'm not telling tales. A filing came in Friday, close of business, on the North Shore parcel, an inquiry to purchase, with a survey rider, which is the part that ought to worry you more than the price." He watched her. "A survey rider means they've already had someone out, walking the ground, measuring the seawall. That happens before an offer, not after. It means whoever it is has been looking at that cove for some while. The bus, the heat, the cinnamon still on her tongue, all of it went very far away. "The name," she said again. The filing agent's a firm downtown. Shell work, nominee stuff, you'd get nowhere with it. He picked the satchel back up. But the beneficial party has to be disclosed on the rider itself. That's the one thing they can't hide behind a nominee. And I read a great many riders, Miss Hale, so I'll tell you what I told your grandmother's inquiry, plainly, because you drove across a hot city for it. He paused, and the sprinkler ticked, and the sun laid a long copper bar across the steps between them. The disclosed party is a design house, an atelier, and the principal named on the disclosure is a Mr. E. Vance. Nora did not move. She had known it, the way you know a stair is missing in the dark, a half-second before your foot finds the empty air, and knowing did not soften the drop by even 1 inch. "You've gone pale," Dennett said, not unkindly. "Sit a moment. It's the heat." "It isn't the heat." She sat anyway, on the top step, the stone still furnace warm through her skirt, and the rolled cove across her knees. "That's my employer. As of this morning, that's the man who bought the studio I work in and asked for me by name." Dennett was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, the clerk had gone out of his voice, and something older had come into it. "Then I'll tell you the one useful thing, and go. An inquiry is not an offer, and an offer is not a sale, and a homeowner in a cottage 40 years has more standing than a rider full of surveyors thinks she does. But the appeal window closes, whether you're ready or not, and a filing like this is built to run the clock while it looks like it's helping. Get her a lawyer, a real one, not a friend. Do it inside the week." He shouldered the satchel. "I'm sorry, it's a face you know. Sometimes that's worse than a stranger, and sometimes it's the only thing that saves you. You won't know which for a while." He went down the steps into the long gold light, and Nora sat where she was until the sprinkler had soaked the whole strip of grass dark, and the splinter of yellow paper over her heart said there may be something I can do in a careful upright hand that did not lean, and she understood at last that the note was true. There was something he could do. He could stop. He could put down a pen he had picked up on a Friday. That was the something. And a man does not have to offer to undo a thing he never did. She did not go home. She rode back across the cooling city with the pavilion drawing on her lap and rehearsed nothing, because there was nothing to rehearse. There were only 2 stories and a bench with a rusted scroll. And by the time the bus let her out, she had decided she would give him exactly 1 chance to tell her the truth before she stopped believing anything he said. She was outside the studio at 8 the next morning, not 9, and she went up the hat factory stairs into the wool and glue dark with the heat already building in it. And she found the glass office lit and the blinds up in Elias Vance at the long table, with the Kestrel model files spread across it, in shirt sleeves for the first time, the cuff turned back that precise half-inch, looking as though he had been there for hours. "You're early," he said, without turning. "Again, you keep saying that like it's a fault. It's the opposite of a fault. It's the rarest thing in this building." He looked up then, and something in his face, she watched for it, eased a fraction at the sight of her, the frost thinning at the eyes the way ice thins over moving water, and she hated how much she wanted to trust the thaw. "I half thought you wouldn't come. There's a version of you that stands outside a county office at 8 instead of standing here. I'd have understood it." Her breath caught. "How do you? Because it's what I'd have done." He pulled out the chair beside him, an invitation, plain. "Sit. Look at this before you decide anything about me. Then decide everything you like. But look first." And against every cold, clear instinct behind her ribs, she looked. The Kestrel pavilion lay across the table in a mess of half-truths. The senior team's scheme, Trent's cover sheet, elevations that were handsome and hollow, a roof that would pond water at the first hard rain. Elias walked her through it, without mercy and without heat, a scalpel in a steady hand, and Nora forgot for whole minutes at a time that she despised him, because the man could see a building the way she could, from the water up, from where the rain wanted to go. "There," he said, tapping the roof section. "Your margin note. Water always wants to go home. They fought the water. You don't fight it. You give it a door." She had the trace over the section before she'd decided to, pencil moving, the fall lines opening across the roof like something exhaling. Here, and here. Let it off the low corner, into the wall cavity. Drain it through the sea wall itself. The way the old wall already does it. It's been doing it for 100 years. Nobody has to invent a thing. Nobody has to invent a thing, he repeated, very quietly, watching her hand, except that everybody keeps trying to. They worked. The box fans turned the warming air. The floor filled up behind the glass, phones and low talk and the felted smell going ripe again with the day, and inside the glass room there was only the dry leaf sound of trace paper and the scratch of graphite, and, once, when their hands reached for the same corner of the same sheet, a half-second where his fingers stopped a breath from hers, and neither of them moved, and the whole hot morning seemed to hold still on the point of it, and then she drew her hand back, and he drew his, and the fall lines went on down the roof toward the sea. "You should have signed the Kestrel section," he said, not looking up. "The real one. On the server. Trent Whitlock's name is on a drainage detail that would have rotted a public building out in 4 winters, and yours is in the margin, in pencil, being right and being ignored. That is the entire disease of this studio in one sheet of paper. It wasn't my call, I know. It wasn't your call." He set the pencil down and looked at her. And there was something almost like anger in it, but not at her, never once at her. "I have spent my whole working life watching the person who was right stand quietly at the back of the room while the person who was confident took the commission. I decided some time ago I would not run a room like that. That is not kindness, Miss Hale. It's arithmetic. The right drawing is cheaper than the confident one every single time, if you can only get people to stop being afraid long enough to build it." It was, she thought, the closest thing to a creed she had ever heard a person say out loud, and she believed it. And believing, it was the most dangerous thing that had happened to her in 2 days. Was that a compliment, she said, to break the pull of it, or a lecture? It was a budget observation. And then she saw it happen, saw it cost him, saw the effort of it move across a face built for perfect proportion and no warmth. The corner of his mouth went up, just barely, and he said, "Though I'm told I have trouble telling the two apart. My last 3 assistants left the profession. One of them keeps goats now." Nora stared at him. And then the laugh came up out of her, real, helpless, the second one in 2 scorched days, and it startled them both. "You made a joke," she said. "I did not. You did. About the goats." "That was a joke. Elias Vance, I heard it with my own ears. I stated a fact about livestock." But the corner of his mouth had not gone back down, and for 1 whole minute, in the hot glass room with the fall lines running down toward a sea that wasn't there, the two of them simply looked at each other and were, impossibly, on the same side of something. It was the best hour of the whole miserable week, and Nora knew even while she was inside it that a thing that good, arriving now. From him was a debt she would be asked to pay. She had never once in her life been given something for nothing. She did not intend to start trusting the world about it today. At 10:30, a knock came on the glass, and Deval from HR put his head in with the little envelope face he'd worn all yesterday. Mr. Vance, downstairs. The Reed people and the lawyers. They're an hour early. They're in the big room already. An apologetic flinch toward Nora. Sorry, they only need him. They always only need me. Elias stood and rolled his cuff back down over the turned half-inch, and the frost came back over his features as he did it, deliberate, effortful, a coat he put on to go downstairs in. At the door he stopped. Stay, keep going on the fall lines. Don't let anyone tell you the low corner's wrong. The low corner is the only right thing in the whole scheme. I'll be an hour. 2, if they've brought the bad lawyer. And he was gone, down into the building, and Nora was alone in the glass office, with the pavilion opening under her hands, and the warmth of the morning still on her skin like something borrowed. She should have kept drawing. She meant to. But the flat drawer under the desk was not quite shut. He'd opened it yesterday to lay his mother's cove on the glass, and it had ridden back on its runner a half-inch shy of closed, and inside it, under the soft old folded drawing she already knew, was the squared-off corner of a folder in a heavier stock. The kind of folder that came from firms downtown, the kind Dennett had described with his clerk's careful mouth. Nora looked at the glass wall. The floor went about its morning. No one was watching a woman standing at a desk she'd been invited to sit at. Every practical cell in her body told her that opening a drawer in her employer's office was a fireable thing, and that she needed this job more than she needed to know what was in it, and that a person who trusted the thaw would leave the drawer alone and finish the fall lines and let the good hour stay good. She had never once in her life been that person. She slid the drawer open. The folder was thick. North Shore Reach, LLC ran along the tab in a printed hand, and under it, parcel acquisition. North Shore, and the first page inside was a survey she knew the way she knew her own signature, because she had drawn that coastline 100 times at 1 a.m, the cove, the path, the 2 leaning posts where a gate used to be. The white cottage at the top rendered flat and gray as a footprint, labeled in a surveyor's hand structure 4, to be assessed for retention or clearance. To be assessed for retention or clearance. The heat did not touch her now. She turned the page. A site plan, and over her grandmother's cottage, and the 4 beside it, and the whole green sweep down to the seawall, someone had laid a scheme in confident line, a low civic building folded around the old wall, light wells, a public path where the cottages stood. The seawall kept and celebrated, and everything above it swept clean, and made beautiful, and made public, and made his. It was, she saw with a lurch that turned the borrowed warmth to ice in her stomach, a good building. It was a beautiful building. It was, in its bones, in the way it gave the water a door instead of fighting it, unmistakably drawn by the same eye that had just spent an hour teaching her to trust the low corner. And in the corner of the site plan, in a hand whose verticals did not lean, initialed and dated, was the date. Not Friday. Not last week. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago he had drawn a public building over her grandmother's roof. 3 weeks ago, the same 3 weeks ago, she thought, the room tilting, that he'd said he read her margin note on the server and could not work for the rest of the day. He had found the note and the woman and the cove all in the same season, and he had drawn the woman's home flat and gray and labeled it a structure to be cleared. And then he had bought the studio she worked in and taped a yellow note to her monitor offering to help with a letter he already knew, to the day, would arrive. "There may be something I can do," she said aloud to the empty glass room, and heard how it sounded now. Of course there was something he could do. He was the something. He had always been the something. She did not hear the door. She heard his voice. Miss Hale. Elias stood in the doorway with a roll of reed drawings under his arm, back early, back an hour before the bad lawyer, and his eyes went from her face to the open drawer to the site plan under her hand, and she watched the frost come down over him so fast and so total that she understood at last it had never been coldness at all. It was the shutter a person pulls when the thing behind it cannot be allowed out. "Sit down," he said. "Let me." "Don't." Her voice came level. It always did, right before it got her in trouble, and she was so far past trouble now that level was the only country left. "Don't you dare say sit down to me again in this room." She turned the site plan so it faced him, the way he'd turned his mother's drawing to face her yesterday, edge to edge, courtesy for courtesy. Structure 4. To be assessed for retention or clearance. That's my grandmother's kitchen. That's the window she watches the water from. You've labeled it a structure. The paper did not tremble in her hand, and she was proud of that, coldly, distantly proud. 3 weeks. You dated it 3 weeks ago. You drew this before you ever taped a note to my monitor pretending you'd only just heard she was in trouble. I didn't pretend I just heard. He had not moved from the door. The reed drawings hung under his arm, forgotten. I heard the county's number from you yesterday. I knew whose cottage it was weeks ago, but not that the county had tripled the number on her, not what it was doing to her. That part is the truth, and it's the only part that will matter to you later, so I'm saying it first, even though I know you can't hear it yet. You drew my home as a footprint. I drew that cove as a footprint 2 years ago, Miss Hale, before I knew your name, before I read one word of yours, when it was 5 failing cottages and a seawall the county was going to let the water take because nobody had the money to hold it. His voice did not rise. It never rose. That was still the worst of it. North Shore Reach is mine. The filing on Friday is mine. The survey writer is mine. I am not going to stand in this room and tell you it isn't, because you've already read the date and you'd never believe a word after the lie anyway. And I find, the shutter flickered, just once, at the eyes, I find I would rather you hate me true than trust me false. I have had a great deal of the second. It's worse. Then it's true. She set the site plan down on the glass, gently, the way you put down something that has already broken. You're the developer. You're the letter. You're the reason her appeal will freeze. Everything Dennett read me off a writer, the surveyors on the ground, the clock running while it looks like help, that's you. And you sat here for an hour and taught me to trust the low corner, and let me laugh at your goats, and reached for the same sheet of paper I did, her voice did, at last catch one hairline crack, and she despised it, and the whole time my grandmother's roof was a footprint in your drawer. Yes, he said it plainly, and it was the only bare thing he had given her all morning. And it landed harder than any cruelty could have. All of that is true. And there is a second thing that is also true, that you will not let me say today, and I'm not going to waste it on a morning when you've just found the drawer. I'll wait. He stepped aside from the door, clearing her way out of the glass room, a courtesy so precise it was nearly unbearable. Go and see your grandmother's lawyer, the good one, not the friend. Dennett will have told you inside the week, do it inside the week. Whatever I am, that advice is clean. Don't you tell me what's clean. She was at the door now, the pavilion abandoned on the table behind her, the fall lines running down toward a sea he owned. She stopped a foot from him, close enough to smell the day on him, ink and hot glass and something underneath. Cedar less, nothing at all like Trent, and that was the cruelest detail of the whole cruel morning, that even now, even here, he did not smell like a man who was lying. You want to know what I can't hear yet? I can't hear the difference between a man who bought a studio to save it and a man who bought a woman with a margin note because she came cheap and grateful and already knew how to draw the exact coast he wanted to take. Trent said that to me yesterday, word for word, and I thought he was frightened and small. And he was. But being frightened and small doesn't make a person wrong. Something moved behind the shutter then. Not hurt. She wouldn't grant it hurt, but a stillness gone suddenly terrible. The stillness of a person holding a thing down with both hands. Trent Whitlock told you that. He brought me an iced coffee and a warning, and I didn't drink either. Don't drink anything that man brings you. For the first time in 2 days there was an edge in it, real and cold and aimed, not at her, past her, downstairs. Whatever you decide about me, and you should decide the worst, you've earned the worst. Do not put your hand in Trent Whitlock's. He isn't frightened of me because I'm cold. He's frightened of me because I've read the review file, and there's more in it than a drainage detail, and he knows I know where the rest of it goes. He stopped himself, hard, the shutter slamming back down over whatever had almost come out. That's his to answer for, not mine. Go, see the lawyer. I'm going to fight you, she said at the door. The roll of her own cove clutched to her ribs where the yellow note had been. You should know that first, the way you wanted your name on the record first. I'm going to fight you for that roof with everything I have, and I don't have much, and it won't be enough, and I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to redraw your pavilion while I do it, because 40 people go down those stairs if I don't, and because it's a good building, and being right is cheaper than being proud. Her hand found the cool handle. You taught me that yourself. This morning, before I opened the drawer, for a moment Elias Vance said nothing at all, and the July light pressed white against the glass and lit the fine gray grain of his shirt going nearly silver at the shoulder, and the box fans turned the hot air over and over between them. That, he said at last, very low, is exactly why I asked for you by name. She did not answer that. There was no answer to it that did not open a door she could not afford to walk through. So she pushed the handle down and stepped out into the roar and heat of the floor, and behind her she heard him say one more thing, so quietly the fans nearly took it. Meant for her and not for her, both at once. The second true thing is that I never meant to clear it. Ask me on a day you can hear it. She did not turn around. She walked to her own desk through the ripe wool and glue heat, past the 6 empty chairs pushed neatly in, and she sat. And she woke her screen, and the fall lines of the pavilion were still open in the file where she'd left them, running down toward the low corner, toward the door the water wanted. And she could not look at them without seeing her grandmother's window rendered flat and gray, so she looked at them anyway. Because that was the job, and the job was the roof. Well, Priya said, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of water and the careful face of a woman who had watched the whole silent scene through the glass and understood none of the words. On a scale of goats to news, where did that land? News, Nora took the water. Her hand, she noticed, was steady. She was always steadiest at the exact moment she had the most to lose. It was a talent she'd have traded in a heartbeat for the ordinary luxury of falling apart. He's North Shore Reach. He's the filing. He drew the cove as a scheme 2 years ago, before he ever heard of me. It's all true. Every ugly line of it. Priya sat down slowly on the edge of the desk, in Trent's exact spot from the day before, and did not idle smooth, and did not smile. Oh, Nora, and he told me not to take Trent's hand, and he told me there's more in the review file than a bad detail. Nora drank the water, all of it, and set the cup down in the ring Trent's coffee had left on her cutting mat. So now I've got two men in this building who both want me on their side, and one of them wants to take my grandmother's roof, and the other one put his name on my work for 12 years, and I don't trust either of them the length of this desk. She woke the pavilion fully, the fall lines bright on the screen. But only one of them can save her appeal by putting down a pen. So I'm going to find out which lie is smaller. How? I'm going to see the lawyer at lunch, the good one, not the friend. She pulled the trace toward her and picked up the pencil, and the graphite touched the paper with its small dry hiss. And then tomorrow I'm going to go through the whole review file myself, every sheet, before Vance does, and find out exactly what Trent Whitlock is so frightened of. She looked up, and the July light lay gold across the empty desks, and somewhere below the delivery truck began its slow, backward wail. Because a frightened man is a careless one, and I am done being the quiet one at the back of the room who's right and gets cleared like a structure. Behind them, in the glass office, Elias Vance turned his back to the floor and put both hands on the window frame. And Nora did not see his face, and it was, though she had no way yet of knowing it, the last easy breath either of them would take before the whole thing came down to the studs. The lawyer's office was 2 rooms above a laundromat 6 blocks from the studio, and it smelled of warm cotton and dryer sheets rising through the floorboards, which was, Nora decided, the most honest smell a lawyer had ever worked in. Her name was Adeze Okonkwo, and she wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and listened to the whole thing. The reassessment, the tripled number, the Friday filing, the survey writer, North Shore Reach, the man who owned it and signed Nora's paychecks both, without once interrupting, her pen moving in small sure strokes across a legal pad. "Stop there," she said, when Nora reached the drawer. "The survey writer. You said it disclosed a beneficial party. E. Vance. Dennett read it to me on the steps. And your grandmother has owned the cottage how long?" 41 years, since before she was widowed. It's paid off. There's no note on it, nothing owed, just the county's new number and 90 days. Adeze took her glasses off and folded them, and the beaded chain swung and ticked against the desk edge. "Then I'm going to tell you something you won't want to hear on a hot day, and then I'm going to tell you the thing underneath it." Outside, a delivery bicycle rang its bell twice and was gone. A purchase inquiry with a survey writer does not take a house. It can't. Your grandmother cannot be made to move or made to sell by a filing. What it does is freeze her appeal against the assessment while it's active. The county won't process 2 competing claims on 1 parcel at once. So, the clock runs. 90 days, and if the appeal never gets heard, the tripled number stands, and she owes it every year after. And a woman on a widow's income loses the house to arithmetic instead of to any single villain you could name. That's the ugly part. And the underneath. The underneath is that the man who filed it can withdraw it with 1 signature, and the freeze lifts the same day, and your grandmother's appeal goes back in the queue with 41 years of standing behind it. She put the glasses back on. "Which means, Miss Hale, that whatever else this Mr. Vance is, and I make no guesses about a man's heart, I've been doing this too long, he is not the county. He did not triple her number, he froze her clock, and he alone can start it again. You keep saying he's the reason she'll lose the roof. Legally, he's the only person alive who can hand it straight back." Nora sat with that in the warm cotton smell, turning it, and it fit against the yellow note in her breast pocket in a way she did not like at all, because it made there may be something I can do a true sentence, and she had spent all morning teaching herself it was a trap. "He dated the scheme 3 weeks ago," she said. He drew my grandmother's kitchen and labeled it a structure to be cleared. To be assessed, a daise corrected without looking up. For retention or clearance. I do property work, Miss Hale. I read 100 of those a year. That's not a man's decision. That's a surveyor's checkbox. Every structure on a parcel gets that stamp before anyone's decided anything. The barn, the shed, the mansion, all of it. Retention or clearance, assess and report. It tells you what a surveyor was told to look at. It does not tell you what the owner means to do. She tore the top sheet off her pad and slid it across. Here's what you do this week. Get me your grandmother's deed and the original assessment. And then you go and ask your Mr. Vance one question, plainly, and you watch his hands when he answers it. What question? Will you withdraw the filing today? She capped her pen. A man's speeches you can't trust in this heat. But watch whether the pen moves. Nora walked the 6 blocks back through the white noon glare, with the torn sheet folded into her pocket, beside the yellow note, 2 pieces of paper over her heart now, and the tar caught at her heel the way it had a lifetime ago that morning. And she thought, watch whether the pen moves. It was, she realized, exactly the test Dennett had handed her on the steps, and exactly the one she'd been too frightened to name to herself. A man does not have to offer to undo a thing he never did. But he does have to actually undo it. Speeches were free. Signatures cost. She did not go and ask him. Not yet. Because there was still the review file, and the thing in it that Trent Whitlock was frightened of. And she had promised Priya and herself both that she would find it before Vance did. Not out of loyalty to either man, but because a woman fighting for a roof needed to know exactly how many people in the building were lying to her. And about what. She got her chance at 6:30, when the floor had emptied into the long gold evening and the glass office stood dark, and Elias had gone downstairs to the Reed lawyers again. And the review file, 40-odd sheets in a fat gray binder, sat on the long table where they'd worked the fall lines, waiting to be read by whoever came first. Keep watch, she told Priya, who had refused to go home. If the elevator that doesn't work suddenly works, you sing. I'll sing like a smoke alarm. Priya stationed herself at the glass with her bag on her shoulder and her heart in her mouth. What am I looking for? I'll know it when I see it. Nora opened the binder under the desk lamp, and the felted wool and glue smell of the old building settled around her. And the box fan 2 desks down clattered its loose grill, on and on, the metronome of the whole scorched week. She read fast, the way she read everything, from the water up. The Kestrel scheme, Trent's cover sheets, the elevations that were handsome and hollow. And then, near the back, behind the pavilion drawings, a second project entirely. A bundle that had no business in a Kestrel review file at all, and that was the first thing that made the hair stand along her arms. A completed job. 2 years old. A community aquatic center out in the county, a public building with a long span roof, the kind of roof that carried real load and real risk, and Trent Whitlock's name on the cover. And stapled behind it a structural certification with an engineer's stamp, and Nora, who had drawn 100 roof sections at 1 a.m, saw the wrongness before she could have said what it was. The stamp was on a revised sheet. The revision was dated after the original engineer had signed off. And the signature over the stamp. When she laid it beside the engineer's real signature 3 sheets earlier, leaned the wrong way. Priya, she said, very quietly, come and look at this without looking like you're looking. Priya drifted over, humming, and bent as if reading over Nora's shoulder for gossip. Her humming stopped. Is that he changed the long span detail after the engineer signed, made the members lighter, cheaper, saved the job money on steel. Nora's finger did not tremble on the page, and she was distantly, coldly proud of that. And then he put the engineer's stamp on the cheaper version himself, because a real engineer would never have stamped it. It's a public roof, Priya. Children swim under that roof. Her mouth went dry around the word, and she made herself finish it clean and careful and true. It's held 2 years because it hasn't had a hard winter load on it yet. The first heavy snow that sits on it long enough, water always wants to go home, Priya whispered. And so does weight. And so does weight. Nora closed the binder softly. This is what Vance found. This is what Trent's frightened of. Not a drainage detail that rots a wall in 4 winters. A forged stamp on a roof that people stand under. She sat back, and the fan clattered, and the gold light lay long across the empty desks. Trent didn't come to my desk with an iced coffee because he's frightened of losing a commission. He came because Vance has read this binder, and I'm the one being pulled into Vance's orbit. And Trent needs me to hate the man who's holding the one file that ends him. Then you have to give it to Vance. I have to give it to the county, Nora said, and an engineer, and whoever inspects that building before one more season sits on that roof. Vance is a means, not an end. She stood and slid the binder back to the exact angle she'd found it. But I'm going to need Vance to do it, because I'm a junior with margin notes and no standing. And he's a managing principal with a firm and a lawyer downstairs. So she squared her shoulders in the gold light. It seems I need my cold boss after all. She was reaching for her bag when the stairwell door banged, and Trent Whitlock came onto the floor with his jacket over his shoulder and his smile idling low, and stopped when he saw the two of them by the long table. And his smile did not change, but everything behind it did. Working late. He came down the aisle, unhurried cedar cologne rolling ahead of him against the ripe heat. Dedication. Vance will love that. His eyes went to the gray binder on the table and stayed a half-second too long, and Nora watched a man do arithmetic he did not want to do. That's the review file. It is, Nora said. You shouldn't be in it. That's principal-level material. I'm redrawing the pavilion. It's the pavilion review. Is it? He set his jacket down on a chair, slow, and the swing had gone out of his loafer. You know, Hale, I gave you good advice yesterday, and you pushed a coffee 2 inches away from you like I'd handed you a snake. I'm going to give you one more piece, for old times, and then I'm going to stop being your friend, because you're making it very hard. He put one finger on the binder, lightly. A small trespass, the kind he specialized in. Whatever you think you saw and hear, you didn't. Junior eyes on a senior file, in a heat like this, at the end of a long day. People see all sorts of things that aren't there, and people who go around saying they saw them tend to find that a bad reference travels faster than they do. The smile held, low and smooth and meant to be heard. You need this job. You've got a grandmother and a roof, I'm told. Sad situation. Be ashamed to add your own to it. The floor was very quiet. Priya had gone still as held breath. Take your finger off the file, Trent, Nora said. Or what? Or nothing. She did not raise her voice. She had learned that from a colder man than this one, in a glass room, 2 days ago. That's the part you never understood about me. There's no or. I'm not threatening you. I'm just not afraid of you, and I've finally worked out that those aren't the same thing. She picked up her bag. You changed a long span roof after the engineer signed it, and you stamped the cheap version yourself. 2 years ago. It's a public building. I know what your finger's on, and I know what's under it, and you knew it the second you walked in and saw where I was standing. Every trace of the idol went out of him at once. What was left was not smooth at all. "You have no idea," he said low, "what you're—" "I have exactly one idea," Nora said. "And it's the only one that matters. That roof needs an inspection before one more season, and I'm going to make sure it gets one, whatever it costs me, because being right and quiet at the back of the room is a thing I used to do and don't anymore." She walked past him toward the stairwell, and Priya fell in beside her, and at the door she turned. "Vance told me not to take your hand. I didn't understand why. I do now. Go home, Trent. Whatever you were going to do about that roof, do the decent thing first, for once, before someone makes you. It'll go better for you. It's the only advice I've got, and, unlike yours, it's free of charge." She went down the hat factory stairs into the wool and glue cool, with her pulse loud as a fist on a door, and behind her, on the floor, Trent Whitlock stood alone by the review file with the gold light going out of the windows, and did not follow, and that, more than anything, told her she was right. She found Elias Vance in the big room on the floor below, where the Reed lawyers had left their coffee cups and gone, standing over a scatter of contracts with his cuffs turned back and his jacket long since abandoned, and he looked up when she came in, and something crossed his face that she was too tired now to pretend she didn't recognize. Relief, plain and unguarded, the frost gone off it entirely. "You're still here," he said. "I found what's in the review file." She set her bag down. The aquatic center, the long span roof. The stamp Trent forged after the engineer signed off. She watched his hands, the way two people had told her to. His hands went very still on the contracts. "That's what you meant, when you said there was more in the file than a drainage detail, and it was his to answer for." "Yes," he straightened slowly. "I found it 3 weeks ago, when I was doing due diligence on the studio I was about to buy. It's the reason I moved as fast as I did. I couldn't leave that file sitting in a firm that might quietly lose it. I've had an independent engineer under a quiet retainer for 11 days. The inspection's already scheduled. The building will be shored and the roof rebuilt before the first snow load, at Vance Atelier's cost, whatever Trent did, because the people under it don't care whose name forged the stamp." His jaw shifted. "I was going to tell you when it was done and safe, not while it was still a live wire in a binder. I did not want you carrying it. You have enough roofs." Nora stood very still. "You scheduled the inspection before you'd even met me. I bought a studio with a forged stamp buried in it. Of course I scheduled the inspection. That's not heroism, Miss Hale. It's arithmetic. A child's roof is cheaper to fix than to explain." He said the word carefully, the way she had, splitting it clean from the harm. "I only ever do arithmetic. I've told you that. The trouble is that I'm bad at telling anyone the sum until it's finished. And people leave in the middle, thinking the sum is cruel when it was only unfinished." He looked at her. "You didn't leave in the middle. You went and read the binder yourself. I have wanted, since I was 12 years old, to be understood by exactly one kind of person. I've spent a great deal of money and made a great many people afraid trying to build a room with that person in it. And it turns out she was already inside the building, drawing the cove at 1 a.m, being right and getting ignored. The shutter did not come down. For once, he let it stay up. That's the second true thing, or the beginning of it. Ask me the rest." "Adese Okonkwo," Nora said, instead, "my grandmother's lawyer. She told me to ask you one question, and watch your hands when you answered." She took the yellow note out of her breast pocket, the one that had ridden over her heart for 2 days, and set it on the contracts between them, face up. His own careful, upright hand offering there may be something I can do. Will you withdraw the North Shore filing? Today, now tonight, Elias Vance looked at the note. And then, without a word, without a speech, he pulled a fresh sheet from the scatter on the table, a withdrawal of interest already drafted, she saw, already prepared, dated with today's date and waiting only for a name. And he uncapped his pen and he signed it, in a hand whose verticals did not lean, while she watched his hand the way 3 separate people had told her to. The pen moved. It's been drafted since Monday night, he said, setting the pen down. I couldn't file the withdrawal until I'd told you the truth, because a withdrawal on its own, with no explanation, would have looked like exactly the trap you already think it is, a man taking his hand off your throat and asking to be thanked. I wanted you to know first that the hand was never meant to be a threat. Now you know, or you know enough, and it's signed, and it goes to the county at 9 tomorrow, and your grandmother's clock starts again, and her 41 years beat the county's number in any hearing in this state. That part was always going to end well, Miss Hale. I made sure of it before I ever taped a note to your monitor. I only did the parts in the wrong order, the way I do. Then tell me the rest, Nora said, and her voice was not level now, and she let it not be. The second true thing. You said ask you on a day, I could hear it. I can't tell if this is the day. But I'm asking, why did you draw my grandmother's cove as a scheme 2 years ago? Why does it matter to you enough to buy 5 failing cottages and a seawall the water was taking? What is North Shore Reach really for? And Elias Vance, who did not lean, who paid to keep his face still and had paid it all his life, put both hands flat on the table and let the whole thing come out level and low and finally, without a shudder over any of it. My mother drew that view the summer I was 12 from the green bench with the scroll on the arm, he said. We had 9 summers in the cottage 4 doors down from your grandmother's gate. They were the only 9 summers of my life that I remember being warm. I mean warm the way you mean it, not the temperature. My father was a cold man who taught me that warmth was a weakness other people used against you, and he was very good at teaching, and I was a very good student, and the only place the lesson didn't take was that cove. Because my mother would sit on that bench and say, water always wants to go home, find where it's going and let it. About the seawall, about the tide, about me. She meant me. His hands did not move. She's living, before you ask. She's in a good place inland. She's cared for. She's well. But her memory's going soft at the folds, like her drawing, and there's a great deal she can't find her way back to anymore. Except the cove. She can always find the cove. She asks about the green bench. She asks whether the wall's still holding the water back. Nora's throat had closed. Elias. So when the county sent word 2 years ago that the North Shore parcel was failing, the wall undermined, the cottages red-tagged, the whole cove slated to be let go to the sea because no one had the money to hold it, I bought it. Through a shell, through a nominee, through North Shore Reach, because I did not want it to be a rich man buying a view. I wanted it to be someone holding the water back. I drew a civic building above the wall to pay for the wall, light wells, a public path, so it funds its own upkeep forever and belongs to everybody. The way she'd have wanted, the way she taught me a good building belongs to the water and the people, and never to the man who signs it. He drew a breath. Retention or clearance was the surveyor's stamp on every structure, and I never chose clearance for one of them. Not the sheds, not the wall, not structure 4. My whole plan was retention. Every cottage kept. Every family that wanted to stay, staying, freehold, protected, the taxes held down by the civic trust. Forever, I never meant to clear a single roof, Nora. I meant to be the reason none of them ever could be cleared again. I meant to hold the water back the way she couldn't anymore. The fan clattered somewhere above them through the floor, faint, and the last gold went out of the high windows, and Nora stood in the ruin of 2 days' certainty, with the withdrawal drying on the table. "And then," she said, unsteadily, "and then, 3 weeks ago, doing due diligence on a studio I was buying for the completely separate reason that it held a forged stamp over a public roof, I opened a shared server and read a roof section with a note in the margin. Water always wants to go home." My mother's exact words, in a stranger's pencil at 1 a.m, on a drawing of a cove that leaned toward the sea the way only a person who loved it could draw it. His voice did not rise. It never rose. But it had gone, at last, entirely without frost. I could not work for the rest of the day. I found out who'd written it. I found out she worked in the very building I was buying. I found out she summered. No, I found out her grandmother owned Structure 4. The white cottage at the top, the one 4 doors down from the boy I used to be. And I did the only thing I know how to do, which is arithmetic done in the wrong order, and told to no one. And I bought the studio, and I asked for her by name, and I told myself it was about the pavilion. And it was never about the pavilion. He looked at her. "You asked me, that first morning, how a man who arrived at 7 could know what you carry. I knew, because I've been carrying the same cove up the same stairs my whole life. I recognized the weight. That's why yours is the only desk on that floor I never touched. Nora Hale, who counted train fare and read county letters, and never once in her life let anyone see her count the lifeboats, discovered that she was undone, completely undone, standing in a lawyer's emptied room in a heat that would not break, and she did not fight it. You could have just told me," she said, "that first day. You could have said, 'I loved the cove your grandmother lives on. I'm trying to save it. Help me.'" Could I? The corner of his mouth moved, that costly near thing. A cold stranger buys your workplace and tells you on day 1 he's been in love with your grandmother's coastline since before you had a name, and he'd like your help, and also your trust, and also 9 weeks of your best work. Which of us would have believed him? Neither of us. Neither of us. So I did it in the wrong order, and you found the drawer, and you hated me true, and I'll take hating true over the alternative every day there is. I told you that too. He picked up the yellow note, her note, and turned it in his fingers. There may be something I can do. There was. It's signed. It goes tomorrow. Your grandmother keeps her window and her wall and her 41 years. And she keeps them whether or not you ever speak to me again after tonight. Because I will not have that roof be the thing that buys your good opinion. It's separate. It was always going to be separate. That's the one thing I got in the right order. And Nora crossed the room, past the emptied coffee cups and the drying signature, and stood in front of him close enough to smell the day on him. Ink and hot glass and nothing false at all, and she said, "The Pavilion Review is in 8 weeks. 7. Now we'll make it." She took the note out of his hand, the real Kestrel Pavilion. "And the Cove building, the civic one, I want to draw the seawall detail, the whole thing, the way the old wall already does it. Nobody has to invent a thing, except everybody keeps trying to. Except everybody keeps trying to." Her eyes were wet, and she let them be. "And on a day I can hear it. Not tonight. Tonight I'm going to go and call my grandmother and tell her the clock started again, and listen to her lie about how she wasn't worried. But on some day soon, you're going to sit on that green bench with the flaking paint next to a woman who ties her scarf to it in a wind." And you're going to tell her that the boy from 4 doors down grew up and held the water back. And I'm going to be there. Because I've decided something. What have you decided? That I met you, and I hated you, and it turns out I needed you, she said. And I'm tired of pretending the third one cancels the first 2 out. It doesn't. They all just turned out to be true at once. Like the 2 stories. She almost laughed, thin and real, the third in 3 scorched days. You made a joke about goats to a woman whose grandmother's roof you'd drawn as a footprint, and I laughed. And I've been furious at myself for it ever since, and I'm done being furious at myself. That's what I've decided. For a moment, Elias Vance said nothing at all, and the last light was gone from the windows, and the box fan clattered faintly through the floor above, and then he did the thing she had not seen him do in 3 days. He let the whole shutter go, all of it, at once. And what was underneath was not cold, and had never once been cold, and it was aimed entirely at her. On the record, he said, very low, before anyone downstairs tells you a prettier or an uglier version. I asked for you by name because I have spent my whole life being right and quiet at the back of a cold room, and I found the one other person who does it at 1 a.m. in pencil, and I could not bear to let her stand at the back of one more room. That's the whole sum. Told in the right order for once. She did not answer that with words. She reached up and turned his cuff back down over the precise half-inch, the small deliberate thing he did when he was afraid, and she smoothed it flat. And she said, "You don't have to keep your face that still anymore." "Not with me. It's expensive, and I've seen the budget." And Elias Vance laughed, actually laughed, once, startled and helpless and warm, the first time anyone in that building had heard it, and the sound of it was the best thing in the whole long scorched week, better than the cinnamon, better than the withdrawal drying on the table, and Nora thought, there it is. That's the thaw. It was real the whole time. I just found the drawer before I found the man. The pavilion cleared its public review 7 weeks later, on a bright, hard morning at the end of August, with the fall lines running down the roof toward the low corner, and the water given a door instead of a fight. And the board that had been sharpening its knives put them away and voted the thing through. And 40 people did not carry bankers' boxes down the hat factory stairs. Nora's name was on the cover sheet. Elias had put it there himself, in a hand whose verticals did not lean, and when Trent Whitlock's name came up in the same meeting, it came up in a different room entirely. A quiet one, with an engineer and a county inspector and a lawyer who was not a friend. And the aquatic center closed for the autumn to have its roof rebuilt at Vance Atelier's cost, before one flake of the coming winter could sit on it, and every child who swam there swam under new steel come spring, and knew nothing of any of it, which was exactly as it should be. Sal had a cinnamon one waiting the morning of the review. War's over? War's over, Sal. Won or lost? Won, Nora said, and it was the first time in 6 years she had let herself say it out loud, and the word tasted better than the sugar. They went up to the cove on the first cool weekend of September, when the summer had finally loosened its hand from the city, and the light came slantwise and gold across the water. Gran was on the green bench with the rusted scroll, her scarf tied to the gap in the wall so she could find her way, and she looked at the tall, quiet man coming up the north path with her granddaughter and said, "Before anyone had introduced a soul, you're the boy from the Merrick cottage. 4 doors down. You had a mother who drew. Elias Vance stopped very still on the path. You remember her." "I remember everyone who loved this wall," Gran said, and patted the flaking green iron beside her. "Sit down, then. You've the look of a man who's been holding his breath a long while. Tell me who held the water back." And he sat on the bench above the cove where he had been warm 9 summers of his life, next to the woman whose roof he had saved by signing his own claim away. And he told her, level and low and without a shudder, over any of it, while Nora stood at the gap in the wall with her grandmother's scarf snapping in the sea wind, and the salt and wet stone and green low-tide smell of the whole cove rising up around them, and understood that she had, at last, everything in the right order. The wall held. It holds still. The civic building above it went up the following year with a public path where the cottages stood, and the cottages kept exactly where they were, freehold and protected. And Gran's window looks at water that is worth more than any number the county could ever put on it, and belongs to her, and to everyone, and to no man who signs it. There is a bench with fresh green paint now. Someone rusted through has been mended. And on a fine evening you might find 2 people on it who met and hated each other and needed each other, all 3 at once and all 3 true, drawing the same cove from the same bench in 2 different hands, one that leans, and one that never learned how, and both of them, finally, going home. If this story warmed you even half as much as that cove warmed a cold man, do stay a moment before you go. Tap that subscribe button and the little bell beside it. Leave a comment and tell me which line found you, and share this with someone who needs reminding that the right drawing and the right person are always cheaper than being proud. Thank you for listening. I'll have another story waiting, warm, when you lose, and when you win.